my varied attempts to get Danger Rangers back into the public consciousness, I've had various thoughts about how the show would work in modern day. Because 2023 marks the 20th anniversary of the original pilot being released, I figured it would only be right to share my ideas for adapting Danger Rangers for the modern age. Because I think the safety messages seen in the original show still hold up all these years later, I don't want this new iteration to be written solely as a means to educate the viewers. You can still have safety topics discussed, but in a more casual tone that doesn't come off as too much like a PSA. No, my idea for a Danger Rangers revival takes it out of the realm of children's edutainment and more like a procedural drama for an older audience, with light elements of comedy thrown in. Think something like 911 and 911 Lone Star mixed with Thunderbirds or Tomica Hero Rescue Force, but the entire cast is made up of walking, talking animals. In this iteration, the Danger Rangers are a team of elite agents dedicated to tackling any emergency that's not easily handleable by your typical fire or police department. They're the ones you call when you need the heavy artillery for a major catastrophe, like a wildfire, volcano, or blizzard. Something that's more in line with the recent extreme weather events hitting the US as of recent. Other disasters like earthquakes, bomb threats, and biohazardous accidents would also be part of the Danger Rangers' wheelhouse. That's not to say they would act alone. If they weren't acting alone, they are typically the ones in charge of whatever emergency service is requesting their aid. Think of the Danger Rangers being at the top of the public service food chain. The only ones that could possibly outrank them would either be the Pentagon, the CIA, or, in extreme circumstances, the President. As for the Rangers themselves, I'd like to tweak them a bit to better fit the new genre they're entering. Sully is considered the face of the team, usually the one to take interviews with the media and hold press conferences whenever necessary. He's still the leader, but make his egotistical tendencies be something he has to work out, as it could quite easily interfere with his duties as a ranger. His time spent in the limelight being the result of a desire to be famous due to consistent pressure from his showbiz parents, who wanted him to carry on the family business of performing as a circus troupe. He's still competent at what he does, he just has more pronounced flaws that need addressing every now and then. For casting, I'd probably go with someone like David DeLuise, since Jerry Houser is all but retired from voice acting following the original show's run, and DeLuise unintentionally sounds like Houser. Imagine something along the lines of Coop from Megas XLR with the authoritative tone he took as Jerry Russo on Wizards of Waverly Place.
And I don't even want to think about that 65 lowrider with the green shag trim and the chain link steering wheel.
Kitty is still second in command, but it's arguable as to who really is the one in charge. She's a former international agent that worked for Interpol, so she usually leads in events that requires the use of SWAT teams or even espionage. Her relationship with Sully is a bit more strained. They argue over differing tactics for how to handle certain emergencies, debate about main priorities for search and rescues, and Kitty is usually the one to be the most irritated with Sully's ego trips because she considers it a threat to whatever job they're doing. But in spite of it all, they still have that will they or won't they relationship that every drama is required to have. Grey Delisle is irreplaceable as Kitty in my eyes, so she stays. But rather than sounding like Frankie Foster, I'd like to see her channel Mariska Hargitay's Olivia Benson from Law & Order SVU.
Montreal SVU did a mailing to all precincts. Photos of a girl. I know that I have them.
Yeah, I'm tired. Can we stop talking now?
No, baby, I need you to hang on, okay? Just 1 second. Why don't you sing me a song?
Burble is now the team's medic. A surgeon plucked straight out of the World Health Organization, him being a polar bear usually makes him the leader of any winter-related emergency like blizzards or avalanches. Outside of that, he's usually taking charge of any medical tents set up in the back lines of emergency sites, tending to any injuries received by the other workers or whoever they're rescuing. He's still a good-natured soul, despite a rough upbringing after losing both his parents in a plane crash. He's quick to break up any arguing Sully and Kitty might be doing, but knows when to keep his distance. It's hard to actually make Burble angry, but when he does, you better not be the one on the receiving end. Harming a child or threatening to harm a child is a quick way to get on Burble's bad side. Much like Delisle, Kevin Michael Richardson is hard to replace, so he also stays. Squeaky is an interesting case. Because of his very short stature, he's usually in charge of recon in areas where his larger teammates can't reach. This means he's usually the one to get when you need to investigate a cave-in, collapsed building, or any sort of normally inaccessible room. Much like the original show, he's quick to anger. He'll snark at any chance he can get and is very loud in order to make up for him being small. But in this incarnation, it comes at a price. He has high blood pressure and too much anger could kill him at any second, considering he's a mouse. He's aware mice don't have very long lifespans and wants to live life to the fullest, though his demeanor sometimes comes at the cost of the occasional moment of existential dread. Because this is aimed at an older audience, he swears, but has to keep it to a minimum whenever he's around kids. Otherwise, money goes into the swear jar, which is usually seen nearly full. For casting, I'm afraid Rob Paulsen might be getting a bit too old for the role, so I'd probably recast him with someone like Eric Bauza or even Bobby Moynihan. Bert is still the team's tech guy, but he's a bit more of a mad scientist in this incarnation. He invents things for overly specific scenarios that wouldn't really happen, but he still insists the team will eventually need it. He still puts out competently made gadgets for the team to use, but they're so good that he rarely needs to improve upon them, leading to his more out-there inventions. Because he's a turtle, he's rarely of any use out in the field, so he usually stays behind and does most of his work behind a computer monitor, assisting in rescues via projection. He's been wanting Burble to operate on him to give him cybernetic implants of his own design so he can be more physically efficient, but he has trouble convincing the polar bear to actually go through with it. Because Mark Hamill is arguably harder to get and more expensive today, it'd probably be easier to get a sound alike. Personally, I'd go with Matt Olson, who's best known as Bentley in the Sly Cooper series. Since Hamill's Bert sounds like Bentley to begin with, it wouldn't be that noticeable of a change unless you actually looked for it.
Well, this just doesn't make any sense. Place the conversion cube's blue gamma rod into hex port 5 as shown in diagram C/12. Where's that helpline number?
Gabriella acts not only as mission control for the Rangers, but she's also the one that fields in requests for the team's services, which she only views as a slight step up from her time working at an actual 911 call center. This usually comes in the form of personal phone calls from emergency groups or 911 calls that get forwarded to Danger Rangers HQ. When not taking calls, she's usually matching Squeaky in the snark department, exchanging playful barbs with each other. She dreams of being able to participate in actual rescues, but her fragility as a hummingbird usually makes her unfit for the field. Despite this, she's still seen as a valued member of the team and is usually designated as the team mom. As for casting, there's nothing wrong with getting Tazia Valenza back, but for getting David DeLuise as Sully, part of me wants to recast her with Maria Canals Barrera, just so we can have a weird Wizards of Waverly Place reunion. Farbat is Bert's biggest contribution to the team's assets, being a near-indestructible automaton that Bert uses as a living guinea pig for his more unique inventions. He's got a cheerful demeanor and remains one of the only comedic elements to the show, but it's more along the lines of black comedy. He openly enjoys the prospect of being on the receiving end of his creator's experiments, even if they nearly kill him in the process. He's forbidden from stepping outside of HQ because the last time he wandered off, he was nearly labeled a weapon of mass destruction by the CIA. Because of John Cassier's fondness for the character, he gets to stay in the cast as well, but his voice would lean a bit more towards that of the Crypt Keeper, especially whenever he laughs. Savo is arguably the hardest nut to crack. As much as I love his smarminess and antagonistic relationship with Squeaky, I feel like that would need to be modified in order to better fit the genre. Savo is still the team's supercomputer, but is more closer to that in style of Heil 9000. He remains calm and collective, even in the most dire of emergencies, but will still have a semblance of attitude. Being a supercomputer, he has access to any database in the US government, but can only seek them out when given direct orders to. Only the Rangers themselves can directly give orders to him, but in keeping with the dynamics of the original show, only Squeaky seems to have trouble actually getting Saba to follow through with him. Think of it like someone trying to get Siri or Alexa to work properly. As for his voice, I'm not against Charlie Adler returning, but I don't think he'd be the right choice for this new iteration. If I had to pick favorites, I'd probably go with Alexander Armstrong, who was Mr. Smith in the Sarah Jane Adventures and Danger Mouse in the 2015 revival of the same name.
So, I take it the combined efforts of myself and K9 were satisfactory.
You called him K9?
He's not so bad after all. I've met worse.
As mentioned earlier, this new version would be aimed at an older audience. The emergencies are more life-threatening and risk of death or serious injuries around every corner, even for the Rangers themselves. Anytime the Rangers perform search and rescue, there's a good chance not everyone they will find will still be alive by the time they get to them. It's a grim reminder to both the Rangers and the audience that no search and rescue team is going to have a perfect record. As for the villains in the show, I want them to either be people who just don't know any better, or absolute monsters with no moral regrets whatsoever. Supervillains like Henri Ennui and Quentin V. Vanderbilt would be too fantastical for a show more grounded in reality, so they would either have to be reworked or cut entirely. The music videos would also have to be cut for obvious reasons, but as a compromise, I'd bring Rob Podorf back and rescore all of Randy Rugel's songs to be instrumental orchestral remixes that you can play over action sequences. Podorf has range outside of animated fare, so you could plop him in a new genre and he'd react appropriately. Lastly, I would make the Junior Danger Rangers a group of teens/young adults that the Rangers personally deemed worthy to be possible new team members or successors. Basically any random civilian or emergency volunteer that goes above and beyond in the line of duty. They would be personally gifted a mini Saba watch that alerts them to any minor emergencies within their community. While these Saba units inside them are inferior to the ones the actual Rangers use, it tracks how well they act in their own emergencies, which gives the Rangers an idea of where they would best fit on the team, either as assistants or as possible backup Rangers should they be spread a bit thin. As for where this version of the show would air, that's a bit tricky. While sticking with PBS, albeit outside of PBS Kids' hours, is ideal, it would clash with the other programming surrounding it. Because this is an animated drama geared towards adults, the only real channel I could see this working on is either TBS or AMC. If we have to go the streaming option, I could see it working well on Hulu, with Tubi as a possible backup. Anyways, that's my idea for how to update and revamp Danger Rangers for the current generation. An action-oriented search and rescue procedural drama with just enough of a comedic slant to keep it from being too samey. If you go look up any clip from 911 or 911 Lone Star, you'll see exactly what kind of tone I'm wanting out of it. If you have any ideas or suggestions, have a go at the comments. There's a chance I might read them.
GokaiOrange!